I borrowed this one book, Einstein, The Life and Times, written by Clark. This is the book. It's a pretty big one, so there's a lot to take in. And being that I understand that special relativity is good and general relativity is pseudoscience, I went to see where all this came from, how all this came about. So I looked at the contents. Just go ahead and zoom in, and you can pause it if you want to look at it. But what stuck out to me was Einstein's relativity. You know, obviously they don't separate the two, special and general relativity. They don't try to separate the two. They just say it's a relativity, but clearly they're two completely different ideas. As well, Chapter 10, The New Messiah, page 237. I'm going to skip over the beginnings of it because, well, I don't believe that has any real importance, except for a few statements. But the real importance I want to show you is that not only were there differing opinions concerning general relativity, but that these opinions are kind of ignored these days. Nobody ever talks about how the other scientists were just, what is all this relativity stuff? This doesn't make any sense to me. So here we go. Page 241. The archives reveal some surprising names in both groups. In the first, there is Dyson, who wrote to Hale at the Mount Wilson Observatory on December 29th. Quote, "I was myself a skeptic and expected a different result," end quote, he said. Quote, "Now I am trying to understand the principle of relativity and am gradually getting to think I do," end quote. Hale was less optimistic. Now, Hale was an excellent astronomer. Astronomer, not mathematical physicist. Quote, "I congratulate you again on the splendid results you have obtained," end quote. He wrote to Dyson on February 9th, 1920. Quote, "Though I confess that the complications of the theory of relativity are altogether too much for my comprehension. If I were a good mathematician, I might have some hope of forming a feeble conception of the principle, but as it is, I fear it will always remain beyond my grasp. However, this does not decrease my interest in the problem, to which we will try to contribute to the best of our ability," end quote. His doubts were repeated to Rutherford, to whom he wrote that relativity seemed to complicate matters a good deal. And that is very true. When you have something such as general relativity trying to explain something mathematically, you're not going to have a good time. Rutherford's own qualifications and doubts were unlike those of Dyson and Hale. He noted that the interest of the general public was very remarkable and almost without precedent. The reason being, he felt that no one was able to give an intelligent explanation of relativity to the average man. Think about that for a second. You can't give an intelligent explanation to the average man. We have 4.5 billion years of evolution sitting on our shoulders. If you can't give an intelligent description of something to an average person, chances are you're trying to feed them a bunch of nonsense. He himself did not have much doubt about the accuracy of Einstein's conclusions and considered it a great bit of work. However, he felt that it might tend to draw scientific men away from experiments toward broad metaphysical conceptions. There were already many like that in Britain. He went on, and no more were needed if science was to continue advancing. This was a typical Rutherfordian attitude, illustrating his built-in belief that only the worthwhile experiments were those whose results he could personally repeat and check. So far as the work of Einstein was relative to Newton, he said in 1923 it was simply, quote, "a generalization and broadening of its basis, in fact a typical case of mathematical and physical development," end quote. But 9 years later, the balance had altered. The theory of relativity by Einstein, quite apart from any work of its validity, he agreed, but cannot but be regarded as a magnificent work of art. Art. It's not science. His qualifications, however, deeply rooted in scientific intuition, may have reflected the slight allergy to Einstein himself which comes out at times in Rutherford's comments. Certainly he showed no wish to have him in Cambridge when the idea was mooted in 1920, or even when Einstein was a refugee from Germany in 1933. Much the same lukewarm view appears beneath the surface in J.J. Thomson. Quote, this is from his biographer. He accepted these results in 1919 and their interpretation put upon them, but he never seemed particularly enthusiastic on the subject, nor did he attempt to develop it, either theoretically or by experiment. If it's supposedly this magnificent theory, then you should be working on it. Other people would want to work on it as well. At least that's from my perspective. If you genuinely understand it and you want to progress in it, in other words, you'll work on it. Said his biographer some years later, quote, I believe from a conversation which I can recall that he thought attention was being too much concentrated on it by ordinary scientific workers, with the neglect of other subjects to which they were more likely to be able to make a useful contribution. Meaning everybody had their attentions on Einstein and this general relativity idea. Everybody was obsessing over it. It was all in the media. It was all popular. It was in the newspapers. It was on the radio. Everybody was talking about Einstein and this relativity theory. And being that nobody could understand it, everybody was more enthralled by it. It became much more mysterious to them. And it became an obsession for people that if you could understand relativity, somehow you were a genius just like Einstein. And if you came out against it, then you were just some idiot. And it continues to this day, that same kind of ideology. His attitude toward relativity was that of a looker-on. Probably the same was true of nearly all his contemporaries. It was the creation of a younger generation, end quote. And when it came to cosmology, Thomson's patience ran out. Not practice, patience. He says, quote, this is from Thomson himself, we have Einstein space, de Sitter space, expanding universes, contracting universes, vibrating universes, mysterious universes, end quote. He noted in his memoirs, quote, in fact, the pure mathematician may create universes just by writing down an equation. And indeed, if he is an individualist, he can have a universe of his own. There's so much in here. There's just so much. This book is 650 pages. I have a lot of digging to do to see where we took a major detour from rational scientific explanations of nature. This happened almost 100 years ago, where people that got so excited about this Einstein and about this mathematical stuff that they just completely lost touch with reality. And I think the last theory where everything just really lost touch and we're trying to get back to like real physics again was the pseudoscience of string theory. I think that was the last straw, and we're realizing slowly that unless we have actual observation of what is occurring and repeatable experiments, then chances are it's not science at all. And it has nothing to do with science. It's an art. Math can be an art. But just because the math is beautiful doesn't mean it's science. Today is September 28th, 2015. Everybody have a good day.